All right, so guys, we had a bit of a funny situation yesterday. I guess I'll just explain what happened, but I also want to get serious with the whole storming the field. It is becoming a big problem for the NCAA. I always liked storming the field. It's not a big deal, but ever since that Alabama situation where the Alabama receiver last year punched the student or something like that, the LSU student, they've really said, listen, we're going to fine the school severely if you storm the field. And now people are trying to gatekeep storming the field. If it's not that big of an upset, you shouldn't storm, things like that. But guys, so I saw this tweet yesterday during the NFL games, and you can see LSU player loses cool and assaults a cheerful, harmless Ole Miss fan during a field storming. Brian Kelly has truly lost control of the locker room. So obviously that comes off very trolly, very funny, but people took that ridiculously serious because it is an interesting interaction with this kid running shirtless on the field. Let's watch the video here. He comes on the field. He screams F LSU, and then he just gets pushed by a big boy defensive lineman. And people were pissed off. They say the kid's at fault for running on the field. I mean, he did scream F you. And then there you can see the big boy getting held back.
Pussy!
And he calls him a pussy.
Let's go, baby!
There he goes. So I just decided to respond to it, have a little bit of fun. And I replied, you can take a look at this. I replied, seriously, that's my cousin who got assaulted, completely uncalled for, and it just gets ratioed to hell. Now, obviously, guys, why do I do this? I don't know. I'm an ass. I like trolling. It's hilarious. But you can see it got 278 replies, and people were just pissed off, and they seriously believed that this was my cousin, and I was mad that he got assaulted by the LSU defensive lineman. So I was pretty surprised that people were actually buying it. So I made a follow-up about 4 hours after my first tweet. I said, update, my cousin came to me for legal advice and I told him to press charges. And then people responded to that as well. But it is just hilarious to see. And again, this is a bigger picture thing that I want to talk about when it comes to these field storming situations. LSU defender shoves celebrating Ole Miss fan during field storming. And you can see this is the exact type of interaction that the SEC was trying to avoid. As of today, the SEC has since fined Ole Miss a total of $100K for their first offense. But this is something that they're really getting hard on some of these schools for stormings. They do not want it. And obviously, listen, the LSU play, the kid ran out of the field and screamed into his face, F you. and then, I mean, listen, I'm guessing, he did deserve it, to be honest, but I was just having some fun trolling some people. I mean, these people just believe anything. And then it looks like, dude, people are pissed off at Pat McAfee. He did go pretty hard at Washington State, but honestly, I like Pat McAfee, if I'm going to be honest. Like, Washington State, they're like, oh, we're not getting any love. No one cares about us, and obviously the whole thing with ESPN, the backstory of this with, not getting a TV deal, the Pac-12 dissolving, and then Pat McAfee, who now works for ESPN, just completely calls out Washington State and says, you're terrible. We show your flag because they show that old crimson flag every week, and people clutched their pearls. They're like, Pat McAfee doesn't understand college football. Dude, I like it. It's hilarious to me. Like someone that, because those smaller schools, they always do this card where they're like, you never talk about us. And it's like Washington, like if Washington State beat Alabama or beat a huge school, everyone would be talking about you. It's just you really haven't faced a crazy good team yet. Yes, you've had a good start to the year, but I don't know. I kind of like that Pat McAfee did that. Just because every single year we hear this with these teams, they're like, the team that I do think has a beef when it comes to not being talked about, and you guys will know. Listen, I've always been first in on Air Force. Always. I said it in the preseason. We can go back and find the video if you guys really want. I said it after week 1. I said it after week 2. Guys, if you look at Air Force's schedule, they are currently favored I'm not even kidding you, to go 12-0. So if there's any team that's being disrespected right now, Air Force, if you look at the analytics, is better than Fresno State in the Mountain West. They're not ranked for whatever reason, and they only got 7 votes in terms of the top 25 poll. It's disgusting. They can throw the ball now. Their quarterback was 7 of 8 for like 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Air Force, possibly a dark horse for the college football playoff. I've said it from day one. And yes, I was trolling, but now maybe they actually make a New Year's Six Bowl. I mean, it is getting pretty crazy at this point. And since we are like 5 weeks through the season or whatever, I figured it would be a good idea to take a look at some bowl predictions. This is Action Network, and they've got Michigan versus Florida State. Michigan sitting -2 in that game. It is great that the Rose Bowl is a playoff game this year. That's how it always should be. The Rose Bowl has been like so meaningless the past 5 years because, guys, if you don't know what happened with the Rose Bowl was supposed to host the playoff in 2020, but because California is like so... they're like a prison cell. They weren't letting anyone do anything because of the pandemic. They had to move the playoff game from California to a different place, so the Rose Bowl didn't get to host the playoff game. The last Rose Bowl playoff game we got, I believe, was Baker Mayfield versus Georgia. And everyone remembers that game. Michigan, Florida State. I mean, Florida State played another Rose Bowl playoff game against Mariota in 2014, and with Jameis Winston, and they got crushed. And then Oregon ended up facing Ohio State in the national title. But there's a lot of stuff I've seen with Michigan possibly being the best team in college football right now. I mean, who really knows? It's just such a waste of a conversation at this point. When your best win is against like I guess their best win would be against Rutgers, actually, because Rutgers is like 4-1 now. Imagine if Rutgers got ranked somehow. But then you've got Georgia and Texas. Yeah, honestly, Georgia, dude, I don't know what you do with Georgia. Imagine if they win out, but then they lose the SEC championship. Do you put them in? I don't know what you would do because it just depends. I think looking at Alabama's schedule, Alabama's pretty much guaranteed going to lose another game, but they still might go to the SEC championship because LSU isn't that good this year, and they already have the head-to-head over Ole Miss. So you could be looking at a 2-loss Alabama in the SEC championship against an undefeated Georgia, and then Georgia loses. They'd probably, I don't know what you would do. Georgia has such a bad schedule. They will get Tennessee, but I believe Alabama also faces Tennessee. So Tennessee might suffer 2 losses, and that would kind of ruin Georgia's signature win. And then there you can see Texas. I mean, Texas is interesting because they can lose to Oklahoma and kind of be fine if they win. Yeah, they're going to be fine if they win out. They could lose to Oklahoma in a neutral site game, win out, and be completely in, possibly as like the number 1 overall seed or number 2, because they have that win against Alabama that keeps getting better and better, considering it's on the road in Tuscaloosa. Alabama's looking really, really good, but Alabama has a brutal schedule. I was looking at their schedule. It's tough. And then you've got Oregon, Fresno State. Yeah, so they've got Fresno State as the group of 5 team. I would, of course, have Air Force in there, but Oregon -19. So this is exactly why we need the expanded playoff, because Bo Nix would probably not be playing in this game unless he had some like NIL stipulation that forced him to play in it. He would be readying for the NFL draft because it's kind of meaningless. And then Notre Dame versus Bama. I mean, those are 2 great names, but obviously in a kind of a meaningless Peach Bowl at that point. The Peach Bowl is always kind of a flop unless it's a playoff game. And then you've got the Capital One Orange Bowl. North Carolina, there's no way North Carolina makes the Orange Bowl. No way North Carolina makes a New Year's Six Bowl. But maybe with the ACC, I still think Clemson has a good chance to, well, they would kind of have to win out. I don't know if UNC faces Clemson this year, but you can see Penn State sitting -9.5. I have Penn State and Ohio State, or at least I predicted it, to make the playoff this year. I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, it is what it is. Ohio State is kind of, they've got a big win, but they're just not as good as they've been, especially on offense. Basically in a pick'em game against Washington. So yeah, I mean, Washington is another team. That would kind of be a letdown for Washington at this point with how good they've started off the season. People were kind of saying, oh, they only won by a touchdown against, who did they beat, California or Arizona? Those teams always just blend together for me in the Pac-12, but I think that was a game, they were up like 28-10, and they allowed like garbage time points, if I remember correctly. They were really in control of it, but those are just some interesting predictions there. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.